You know, you spend so much time complaining about what you want to see in college football. Sometimes you don't realize that thing you want to see, it's happening right in front of you. We are jam-packed. Late Kick is live. It is Sunday night, February 19th, the year of our Lord 2023, high atop a tourist-infested downtown Nashville, Tennessee. Spend that money. Our game is changing right before your eyes. I've got some things to share with you tonight. Not even opinion, just some facts. And it may make you say, what, college football's doing that? Yeah, college football's doing that. Defense is kind of sort of back. Dare I say, was once thought to be going extinct. Defense back. Got the numbers to prove it. The Longhorn Network just kind of ruined everything. We're going to take a trip down memory lane tonight in another vein, and we're going to just ask ourselves the old what if. It's February, it's what if season, and I've got a what if that may have so many tentacles it represents not an octopus, but several octopi worth of different ways that this had a reverberation throughout our sport. Some would say for the worse, maybe me included, but we'll see where you land on that. I got some spring questions. I've got some SEC scheduling conundrums to talk about. Which rivalries are we going to keep? Which ones are we going to lose in this whole new format? And our buddy Jim Dunaway hit us with a question. Several of you hit us with questions that we're going to answer tonight, but one of them in particular caught my eye, and that was the whole, would you rather fast forward a couple of years in our sport, or would you rather rewind? It's not a kind of a zero-sum question. You can take some and leave some, I know, but if you had to choose one or the other, where would you want our sport to exist? You may think you know where I'm going, and in some cases you're right, but it's not going to be wholesale for me. I am very much going to ride the fence on that one. Midland, Georgia is tuned in tonight. Thank you guys so much. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Calgary, Alberta, Canada. How about Prince George, British Columbia? We're almost as popular north of the border as Sami Zayn was last night. Hey, look, I have roundly criticized the quality of professional wrestling in the modern day, but I did watch last night's event because I have long been of the opinion that Montreal is the best wrestling city on the face of the earth. I said that before anyone did, and they delivered last night, so hats off to you guys. Before we start the show, I want to tell you two things. Number one, I'm going at it with Brandon Walker this week, and it's a home and home, and we're going to his field to start things off. So keep an eye out for that. The second thing I want to tell you is the other night I said randomly a show owners association show that Colin and I did at the old Brentwood studio like 2 years ago had randomly started getting a lot of viewership on the channel. Could be the algorithm. It could just be we struck gold and we didn't know it. So I'm just going to float this out there. As is usually the case, I don't make the decisions around here. Neither does management. You do. If that's a concept that you want us to revisit, let me know. We're completely open to doing it, and technologically, we can pull it off seamlessly, as opposed to last time when Director Colin was holding things together by bubblegum and paper clips and duct tape. So I have a special way that if we do another Show Owners Association, which is just basically a bunch of you come into a private chat and you ask me questions on video and we interact, I have a special way that you may gain access to that. And it may have something to do with a private internal survey that producer Jesse and I have put together, because we want some feedback from you. So if you would be interested in such things, it's a small price to pay, it's free, let me know. You know how to get in touch with me. All right, let's start the show off tonight. Headline, defense is back. Did you know it, though? Did you know defense was back? There was this Big 12 perception for a long time that was reality. If you're a hardcore college football fan, and you've watched for a little while, you're older than 10, in other words, you know the answer to the question, what is Big 12 football? Or at least you know what the answer to that question was in 2013, 14, 15. Here's the problem. Big 12 football started to change, started to evolve, and Big 12 football in 2023 is not what it was in 2015. But yet the answer to the question, or the perception therein, still remains. People will still to this day swear to you they don't play defense in the Big 12. It's just a pinball conference. It's long since been a fallacy. It is long since ceased to be a reality that they're just going up and down the field, basketball on grass out there. In fact, pin pop, I would argue they're playing better defense out there than in a lot of corners of the SEC right now, just with subpar athletes compared to what they have in the SEC. Anyway, I'm not here to chalk talk you tonight. What I am here to do is tell you it's not just a Big 12 thing. A lot of you have complained, and I've been right there with you. You know, I'm of the camp that didn't really mind 9-6 Alabama LSU back in 2011. some of you did, but some of you also don't like 9-6, but you don't like 52-48 every other week. And so you saw the game go in that offensive direction. And you, and maybe I along with you for a little while, said, I hate the way the game's moving. I hate how field position doesn't even seem to matter anymore. First downs, hidden yardage doesn't even seem to matter anymore. It's just like a video game every week. God heard you, and God has responded. And God's on the side of defense. And I don't think a lot of people realize it. We were doing the show. We were putting the show together today. And we were reading some numbers that Uncle Dennis Dodd, has put together over on CBSSports.com. And it kind of sort of caught me by surprise. Now, I knew that adjustments had been made, and I knew the game may be certainly not trending down this perilous, slippery slope of 50-point offensive outputs per afternoon like it seemed like it was for a little while. But I could not have told you what Uncle Dennis told us. But I think it's very good news. So, what if I told you through Uncle Dennis that teams averaged 28.38 points per game in 2022? Without context, that really doesn't mean a whole lot to you. So here's the context. That is down. Scoring was down for the second year in a row, but that's not a trend. You need more than 2 years for the trend. Here's the kicker. Paper thump. That's the lowest overall college football scoring output since 2011. What's happening? Is people get tired of scoring? What's all of a sudden happened? Well, I've got a few theories on this. The first one, I asked a couple of defensive coaches today. The first thing that most of them said is, well, we learned how to either recruit defensive athletes on a different level or we learned how to develop them differently. It was always going to be reactionary. So when the RPO game, which is a very dumbed-down term, I understand that. I got to dumb it down for me, not for you. When the RPO game and when tempo started to merge with the RPO game in big fashion in the early 2010s, it took a little while to adjust. The best of the best had to adjust. Nick Saban famously had to totally reinvent how they did things at Alabama, and if they were having to do that at Alabama, rest assured every defensive-minded coach was having to do that. And so what you don't see anymore is you don't see 6'3", 250-pound inside linebackers, do you? You had to trade something. You had to trade that size out and get a little bit more speed and twitchiness and athleticism. Related note, have you ever tried to spell twitchiness before? I haven't, and I tried today, and that's why there is an embarrassing amount of scribble marks on this piece of paper in front of me. I might as well not use notes. That's one thing that's happened. The athletes have become, I guess, more well-tuned to deal with the modern offense and a lot of the proliferation of different kinds of offenses that you face. Here's the other thing. You might think, well, in a vacuum, that defensive statistic may tell you something, but, Josh, I need to know what the offenses have been doing. Because for all I know, they're just not throwing the ball as much. Maybe they're not running as many plays. Maybe quarterback play has been down the last couple of years. Good point. Also, you're wrong. And that's why I wouldn't make your point for you if you were going to be right. I only make your point for you in the absence of you being here if you're going to be wrong. Overall passing in the sport, highest percentage since 2007. They hadn't stopped throwing the ball at all. Have quarterbacks started to secretly suck? No. Quarterbacks were the second most accurate in 2022 as they have been ever. So completion percentage, sky high. Overall, pass-to-run ratio, sky high. What's happened? Defenses have gotten better. Defenses have become accustomed to and been retuned to deal with the modern offense. And here's the other thing that Dennis Dodd put in this piece over on CBSSports.com. Uncle Dennis to me, Dennis Dodd to you. And the other thing that a couple of coaches told me today. This is one of the sort of, I guess, unrealized benefits on a broad scale of the transfer portal. Because I haven't heard many people talking about this. Sure, you've heard them talking the abstract about how it fills needs and you don't have to develop a guy for 2 or 3 years. You can have a stopgap. You can go get a kid from Kent State and plug him in. But it's really had a disproportionately positive impact on defense. And so recalibrating yourself philosophically and then schematically, and then secondly, getting some help out of the transfer portal, wouldn't you know it? The sport was not just linearly heading into the offensive abyss after all. It turns out some things are still cyclical in college football, and this is one of them. Now, because we have a long show tonight, I'm not going to spend another 10 minutes on this. I could, but I'm interested to see how you feel about that, because we got a kind of a segment coming up later in the show where we look at how things were and how things are and how things could be in the future, and it's a mixed bag. It's just your opinion. It comes down to a matter of taste. The fact is, some people are like me. Some people have no problem watching a slop fest, just a defensive struggle. I think there's beauty in that. I mean, a lot of people think there's beauty in Picasso's work. I don't happen to be one of them, but those people probably fall asleep during a 13-9 game. To each his and her own. Some of you like 54-51, and you like whoever gets the ball last wins, and there's something to be said for occasionally watching a game like that. It's never appealed to me that defense all of a sudden just didn't matter, and it felt like first downs were irrelevant. Like I kind of miss the idea that 3rd and 1, this is a big play here. This could be the turning point. For a while, it felt like you were hardly ever getting to 3rd down. So good for defense. Good for you guys. You're not going out of style after all. They were wrong. Let's move on here. I always ask myself every year, when do we start talking about spring football? And I've left it up to you lately. Past couple of years, I've left it up to you. And whenever you start beating down the doors saying, could you please talk a little bit of spring football, I start talking about it. And here's what I like to do going into spring. No one has answers, so I like to ask questions. I like to tell you where my mind is at, and I like to get a lot of your feedback about where your mind's at on some of these teams. So let's go to the SEC West right quick. Spring questions. Just some quick things I'm watching. This is not an exhaustive list, but when we go to LSU, for example, we could talk about the quarterback battle. Yes, we could. We could easily talk about Garrett Nussmeier and Jaden Daniels, et cetera, et cetera. And we will. We'll talk about it plenty. I'm interested in LSU's defense. And it's not that we're going to get a finished product. That's not what spring football is for. But you see, with a lot of these teams, LSU included, that are bringing in a disproportionate amount of transfers on one side of the ball, what you've learned to start listening for in the transfer portal era is just whispers about potential. And when you start getting towards the end of spring ball, that last week, and then they have spring games, that's when you start getting some feedback from coaches. And if LSU's on the right track, here's what it won't sound like. We're set. That's what it won't sound like. But what it will sound like, if LSU's on the right track, is, hey, we knocked it out of the park with these defensive transfers, and we ain't where we need to be. But don't worry, we've got like 30 more practices in the fall to get there. But by the time this unit rounds into shape, we feel like we've got a really good one. That's what you hope to be hearing internally. I'm not talking about from a beat reporter. I'm talking about from talking to coaches. And a lot of them are pretty open about it after spring is over. They open, by the way, in Orlando against Florida State. I think that game may have been a little bit overlooked this past year. I don't think it'll be overlooked this coming year. So that's one thing I'm watching with LSU. Up the road in Tuscaloosa, even I couldn't look beneath the surface when it comes to Bama. This is one of the, I would say, 3 most high-profile quarterback battles in the country. And it may not end in spring, but it certainly will ramp up in spring. You got one there. You got one at Georgia. You got one at Ohio State. But Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson. I think, in talking to some folks, when Jalen Milroe played that game against Texas A&M, I think the Bama staff was a little bit surprised at how underwhelming he performed and how not overmatched, but how too big the moment seemed like it was for him. What I'm trying to tell you is I would be very cautious watching his game against Texas A&M and assuming that's just who he is. I'm not telling you he's going to win the job. I think Ty Simpson is an incredible player. Has incredible potential as a player. I'm not leaning hard one way or the other here. It's like a 55-45 thing for me, and that's pre-spring. But remember, we're not just watching a quarterback battle here. You got a new offensive coordinator in the house, too. And one of the things you always heard about Pete Golding, the former defensive coordinator in his time at Bama, was Nick Saban accepted when he hired Pete Golding that there was a little bit of a philosophical learning curve. Not necessarily teaching him how to coach football, but teaching him how things worked at Alabama. Well, now you got a guy in Kevin Steele that could finish your sentences for you, so you don't have to take time to do that defensively. But Tommy Rees is Bradley's age, producer Jesse's age. And so you may very well have to do that offensively. I say all that to say the A-Day game may be the least predictive game that we've ever seen in terms of spring ball at Alabama. Consistency at running back, if we wanted to go 2 hours tonight, I could spend some time talking about that as well. Texas comes in there in week 2. I don't know what we're going to call the tour this fall, and I don't know what the forecast is that day. I find it highly likely that we'll be in Tuscaloosa in week 2 this fall. Pencil that in. Don't write that in Sharpie, kids. Next up, let's go all the way up as far as we can in the northwest corner of the SEC and talk Arkansas for a second. You got one new coordinator? Nope, you got 2 new coordinators. And that's where things get a little concerning with a lowercase c. I just think they're interesting. I have spelled out for you my feelings on Arkansas. You cannot watch a team underachieve and have some internal dissension and criticize it, but then also watch a bunch of coaches and players leave and say, uh-oh, that's bad. No, by default, if you have internal issues, you have to do some weeding out. So that's not to say everyone who left Arkansas is bad and the good eggs stayed and the bad eggs are out. We got an egg shortage in this country anyway. So let's be careful just tossing those eggs aside. What I am saying is it's not an automatic negative just because there was some churn there. Now, having said that, especially with the style of head coach Sam Pittman is, it's really important that they got the coordinator hires right here. And so we get to see Dan Enos paired with KJ Jefferson at quarterback. We get to start seeing that a little bit in spring. We also get to see Travis Williams. You know, that guy was the defensive coordinator at Central Florida last year. We get to see him step in for Barry Odom. Now, here's the good news. You're looking on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, at some very poor defensive numbers last year. One of our guys walked in today after they had made this graphic and said, I had no clue Arkansas was that bad defensively. Earmuffs, Razorback fans. They were 100th or worse in points per game defensively, yards per game defensively, and pass yards per game defensively. I know you had injuries. So did approximately every other team in America. Arkansas was pretty bad defensively last year. So you can either watch change happen and say, oh, we're screwed, or you can look at some of these results and say, perhaps we needed the change to happen. At Auburn, did you know they had a new head coach? Yeah, they got a new head coach. His name's Hugh Freeze. My big question about Auburn this spring is, I got to say is 2 times in a row, but bear with me. My big question about Auburn is my suspicion about Robbie Ashford correct? And I feel like I'm on an island here, I happen to think Robbie Ashford has winning football inside him. I don't know whether it's 7 wins or 10 wins or whatnot. I think he got the right head coach at the right time. My suspicion is we will be watching the SEC come November, if he's healthy, and saying, I had no clue Robbie Ashford was this good. It's the old Hendon Hooker syndrome. I'm not going to start calling him the next Hendon Hooker. I'm not going to do that. What I am saying is when Hendon Hooker came to Knoxville by way of Blacksburg, you had seen him play already, and he was kind of, Robbie Ashford's played at Auburn already. You look at the stats, he's under a 50% completion guy. Those are very much stats. But I don't think he's an player. I just think he was in a situation. I hope I've been clear there. I know you tune in for the professionalism and the advanced analytical approach we take to the game. And so that terminology, if it made your head swim a little bit, just rewind and listen in slow motion. I think Robbie Ashford is going to be a pretty good football player this year. Now, having said that, he's still got to prove it. And it's not just that. They've got a lot of line of scrimmage attrition to atone to. Both lines of scrimmage. So it's not 1 on 11, man. He's got to have help. He's got to have, it's a complimentary game to begin with, obviously, so he's got to have help out wide. He's got to have protection. He's got to be given time. But they didn't go get a quarterback yet out of the portal, did they? I speak hesitantly because we still do have the post-spring portal window that will be open, and maybe Hugh Freeze goes and gets a quarterback. But best guess here, is he's seen Robbie Ashford and he has seen the players that he's won with in the past, and he said, he reminds me of some of those guys. I'll be fine with him. If that's who we got to go to war with this fall, I've been in worse situations. We'll be okay. Texas A&M. How is it anything other than Bobby Petrino? How is it anything other than improving the 22.8 points per game you put up last year? That was good for 101st in America. That was good for 13 out of 14 in the SEC. And frankly, when I looked it up, I was surprised they weren't dead last in the SEC. Talent's not the issue. And I clap instinctively when I say that, only because in a lot of places, talent is the issue. And therefore, you can't expect any kind of sizable turnaround when talent is your issue. But if it's not your issue, and the players, the ingredients are in the kitchen, I don't know how many times I'm going to use the kitchen metaphor before I find a new one, but it's so fitting. If the ingredients are here, you just got to mix them and cook them the right way. And hey, what better chef than Bobby Petrino? Come on, that guy's cooked in the past, on the field and off the field. So we're going to leave the off the field over here in the ditch. If you see where I'm going there, you see where I'm going there. And we're going to stay on the field. And I told you I like the hire, only because I know what they're hiring him to do. They're not hiring him to be a head coach. They're hiring him to pretty much keep his mouth shut, stay over in his office, and coach offense, which is uniquely what he's equipped to do. So I don't think we're going to get this answered in the spring either, but I'll tell you what you will start hearing, because there are too many people around the A&M program to just keep things hidden. If you start to hear that clicking sound that resembles a functioning offense, they'll show some excitement. You'll hear it come out of spring ball. It won't take long. You'll know. At Mississippi State, they got a whole new program. I mean, Zach Arnett's over there in the most trying of situations, getting his first shot as a head coach. And he was the defensive coordinator there and the safeties coach the last 2 years. So it's a totally different program. I mean, you're not even talking about one of the late Mike Leach's understudies offensively. You go from an offensive-minded coach to a defensive-minded coach, and I don't care where he came from. But he was internally. He was inside your program. You promoted from within. I don't think there's one question with them. But just overall, what's the program going to look like? And staying in the Magnolia State with Ole Miss, how legit is that quarterback battle? And for those of you who have been tuned out a little bit and the transfer portal just left your head spinning, I got some news for you. Spencer Sanders is not the starting quarterback in Stillwater, Oklahoma anymore. And he may not be the starting quarterback in Oxford. That's the question. How legitimate is this quarterback battle? There are some people out there who would tell you the moment he set foot on campus, you should have just as easily assumed that he's the starter. And then you got other folks who say, Jackson Dart's not going anywhere quietly. And basically in the aggregate, I just sit here and say, all right, good old-fashioned quarterback competition. Had one last year over there in the spring. Got one again this year. Those are some things I'm watching around the SEC West. We'll probably do that for several divisions and conferences coming up. If you are watching live or you're watching replay, thank you for that. This little button that looks like this thumbs up button, do me a favor and click that. And then if you haven't subscribed already, which 43% of our audience is not subscribed, which is just an abominable number. So let's take care of that. Subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't do anything to you. And nor does the show, because of these guys right here, Academy Sports and Outdoors. I had one of you ask the other day, are you guys not with Academy anymore? It looks to me like we are. So they're sitting there right over our shoulder, as trusty as they've always been. Have you looked outside lately? You don't see pollen quite yet, but we're not too far away from it. It's been mild. And I was, not that this interests any of you, but I was looking at some of the climatological patterns for later on this spring as we shift to an El Nino pattern out in the Pacific. Maybe a slow start, but I think we're going to have an active spring. Now, that's for those of us who partake in storm chasing. For those of you who just want to get a doubleheader in at the Little League fields on Saturday afternoon, Academy Sports and Outdoors is your place to be. And I know a lot of you don't even play Saturday baseball anymore, which blows my mind, by the way. If I could just sidebar for a second, it was brought to my attention the other day that several Little League complexes are dormant on Saturdays of all days in the spring, and it's because kids go play travel ball, which I knew about in theory. I just didn't realize it was so big that Saturdays are the days where park's open, come up here and play Frisbee for all we care, go walk your dog up here. That is crazy to me. Anyway, whether you're traveling or whether you're playing in your own backyard, Academy Sports and Outdoors got your hookup. You need new shoes? I know I do. Most of you probably do as well. Academy Sports and Outdoors got your hookup. You need hunting gear? You need tents? You need grills? They got your hookup. And they've got us hooked up to come to you free of charge. Thank you, as always, to Academy Sports and Outdoors and you guys for patronizing them. All right, in order, I'm going to take a sip from the chalice. I'm going to put on some chapstick. And then I'm going to tell you how the Longhorn Network pretty much ruined college football. Here we go. Step one. Very tasty. We spilled the choice liquid in the chalice earlier on the floor over here, so Bradley will have to take care of that after the show. Step two, complete. All right, step three. If I asked you to change one moment in the history of this sport to have maximum impact on the sport, where would you go? It's time to talk about the Longhorn Network. It's time to ask, how much do you remember about 2010? Cam Newton's leading Auburn to a national championship. That's what was happening on the field, but behind the curtain, there was a guy by the name of Larry Scott. He was then the commissioner of the Pac-12, or you might have known it as the Pac-10 at the time. But he didn't like that number. He didn't even like 12 or 14. Larry Scott had a vision, and his vision was to take it to 16. These days, that's not a big deal to us, right? We call those super conferences. But back then, no one had spoken the words super conference. And Larry Scott wanted to be first at the table. Imagine that. Imagine a visionary in the Pac-12. Imagine the West Coast leading the way in college football. Again, we have a massive college audience, and I think you guys are listening to me and saying, that had never happened. Once upon a time, it was kind of the way it was. And it almost really took hold because they were this close to getting Oklahoma and Texas, and in the process, Colorado and Oklahoma State and Texas Tech and Texas A&M to join the Pac-16, as it would have been. Now, a lot of you remember something happened back then. But do you remember exactly how this happened? Depending on who you believe, this was within an hour of happening. It was done. In fact, Larry Scott had already made the rounds. He had been to most of the other universities you see listed on your screen right now. Again, it was Texas OU, Oklahoma State, Colorado, who ended up going anyway, A&M, Texas Tech. Those were all Big 12 programs at the time. And Larry Scott said, we got them all. There was one hanging chad. There was one holdup. As is usually the case, the program dragging their feet because of the most diva-ish reasons imaginable. Horns up, University of Texas. And Larry Scott thought he had him locked down. And unbeknownst to him, he didn't. Because there was a network in the great Northeast named ESPN who was coming in a side door that Larry Scott didn't even know existed and offering something called the Longhorn Network. Everyone's heard of that now. No one heard of a major network partnering with a university to create a standalone entity just to serve their needs. ESPN comes in and says, we will give you $300 million over 20 years. Stats and Info ran the numbers. They're getting $15 million a year for 20 years to have their own network. Why did that have anything to do with the Pac-12? Well, the Pac-12 was in the middle of building their own conference network. It was a non-starter. You're not coming here and having your own network. We can't have that. We're trying to build our own. Guess what Texas did? They axed the whole thing, and they stayed in the Big 12. My question to you tonight is, what would have happened? We know what did happen. What did happen is the Pac-12 had to hit the emergency backup plan button, which was very underwhelming to say the least. God bless Utah and Colorado. They had much bigger aspirations out there. You didn't get a Pac-16. You got a Pac-12. And then the future was what the future ended up being. Oh, here's the richest part of it all. So, as you know, 95% of college administrative types are incapable of telling you the truth. And in true fashion, DeLoss Dodds, who was then, I think, either was he the president or the AD, Jesse? He was high up at Texas. They asked him, Mr. Dodds, Why not go to the Pac-16? Why not be part of the first super conference? And you know what he said? I can't make those kids travel like that. I can't tax their bodies like that. I mean, how irresponsible would it be of us to make the baseball team travel from Lubbock, Texas to Pullman, Washington? The best interest of the kids. That was what was at the forefront of DeLastad's decision-making as the AD there. Now, a side note, if you do want to acknowledge there were also 300 million reasons for them not to go, maybe that was on the back burner, but I have to take him at his word when the women's basketball team at Baylor and their travel schedule, that was really what made that whole Pac-16 merger fall through. Of course it was. I mean, whomst would push against that? Whomst would suggest anything otherwise? Not I. A&M got shook after this. And not shook out of fear, shook out of being irate about what was happening. To be clear, what was happening is their in-state neighbor that they already perceived to get every benefit of the doubt was also being given their own network by a television partner that they were all supposed to be in bed with. So A&M said, bye, we're going to the SEC. Peace. And they went. And they've had immediate success. There was a kid named Johnny Manziel that came through there really, really quickly and put A&M on the map in the SEC. Missouri also, if you're keeping score at home, ends up going to the SEC. Texas and OU, as it turns out, they also end up in the SEC just a little over a decade later. And so the Big Ten and the SEC, they ended up becoming the super conferences. But what if Texas had gone to the Pac-12? What if the Pac-16 had happened? Do you realize what we're talking about there? I'm pretty sure the SEC would have found a way to survive. They were doing fine. The Big Ten would have survived. They're doing fine. And I don't doubt that they would have watched the Pac-16 becoming a super conference and saying to themselves, we got to do the same thing. The Big 12 would have been swallowed up. Big 12 would be essentially what the Mountain West is right now to you. The Big 12 would have gone the way of the Big East. I have no doubt about that. The Kansas States, the Kansases of the world, the Iowa States, they would have been SOL, at least when it comes to football. I mean, the Big East found a way to survive when it comes to basketball, or at least somewhat survive, but I don't think the Big 12 would be what it is today, certainly if Texas and OU would have left. The other really multi-million-dollar question in my mind is, what would the ACC have done? Because, see, if the Big Ten and the SEC all of a sudden were looking around at viable partners for super conferencing themselves, SEC's not looking at OU and Texas. I'll tell you who they're looking at. They're looking at the Clemsons of the world, the FSUs of the world, the Miamis of the world. I think Miami's a sneaky good fit in the Big Ten, actually. And so what would happen to the ACC? I can't guarantee you the ACC wouldn't have been poached and pillaged. All sorts of things would have happened. But here's what wouldn't have happened. The Pac-12 would not have become an afterthought when it comes to things like the college football playoff picture, because that eventually would have come along. They wouldn't be an afterthought when it comes to media rights, because a conference featuring the California schools and Texas and Oklahoma would have fetched premium dollars in the open media rights market. The Pac-12 would have been at the forefront. They would have been an engine, not a caboose. And I've hopped both of them. You'd much rather be in the engine than the caboose. Several Big 12 schools, though, would have been left out in the cold. The Longhorn Network. Now, look, here's where you can decide for yourself. I think it's been a net negative on the sport. I would have loved to have seen the Pac-12 take their turn leading the sport for a little while. That's why I'm still rooting for something, some prayer, some Hail Mary or a miracle out there to happen where they get their media rights situation figured out so we don't have to watch them just in terms of like college football plate tectonics detach themselves and drift off into the Pacific. I don't want to see that. Pac-12 Pate. I can't see that happen. But it could happen. And something's got to be done. Well, something almost was done. I got to credit Larry Scott for trying. Dude did approximately nothing else right out there, but at least he gave it the good old-fashioned college try there for a little while. They're watching us in Alexandria, Ohio, Mobile, Alabama, and Anderson, South Carolina. Thank you so much. We had several questions submitted in the Late Kick inbox earlier today, which reminds me, every question I don't get to on the show tonight, scratch that, not every question, a lot of the questions I don't get to on the show tonight Don't worry, you'll hear them on Tuesday because that's when the Late Kick Extra podcast drops. I appreciate you guys more than you can possibly know being on the YouTube channel. And this is where you have to be to get like 90% of our content. But that leaves the question, what about the other 10%? That can be found exclusively in the podcast feed. You can go the Spotify route. You can go the Apple podcast feed route. I don't really care because we make the same amount of money either way. And by we, I mean the high-level mustaches several floors above us right now. But don't worry. We've held our own against management lately. I'll talk about that later on. I'm so proud of myself, I can't see straight. I am fighting for all of us, though. Okay? I understand that not everybody out there who's about to drive to a 9-to-5 they may or may not like tomorrow can stand up to management and physically dominate them in certain contexts. But I can, and I did, and I'm going to tell you about it later. In the meantime, we got a question about spring games. This is a good one from Hilliard, Ohio. Would you rather see a spring game between two schools, or would you rather keep spring practice as it is? When I am college football commissioner, will give you the option. As for me and my people at Pate State, we want to play someone else in the spring. I'm tired of scrimmaging myself. I want to play someone else in the spring. Now, I will guarantee you two things. Number one, anyone who is forward-thinking enough about this sport is going to understand what I'm about to say is a good idea. And the rest of them are going to come in the comments and claim I said something I didn't say. So let me just go ahead and recap what I'm not saying before I say what I'm actually going to say. I am not saying anyone or any program should be forced to play a game for their spring game. I am saying, as I will when I'm president one day, I want you to have as many choices in life. And I want you to be able to exercise your choice to kind of live however you want to live. I'm going to largely stay out of the way. And when I'm college football commissioner, which will probably come before the presidency, probably. Could be some overlap there, though, depending on my schedule. I want you to have the option. What we're talking about here, if you're unfamiliar, is for about 1,000,001 years, college teams have practiced for 4 weeks in the spring, and then they've had some version of a spring game. And it kind of is what it is. It's kind of an event, but it's really not. What I would love for you to have the option to do, and what I would love for you to have incentive to do, is to schedule a team, if you want to, if you find a dance partner, and play an actual football game. You may modify it. You may have running clocks. You may have 10-minute quarter. I don't care what you do. But here's the incentivized part that I talked about. There is a huge benefit here when it comes to providing our television partners with inventory. You think CBS and Fox and ESPN wouldn't wet themselves if I came to them and said, hello, this is Texas A&M on the line. We're going to play UTSA instead of having a spring game. What do you guys think? What they would think is, after they put the phone down and you heard screaming and celebration in the background, is they would pick it back up and say, when do you want our crew there? It's inventory. That's all it's about, is inventory in the TV game. So the networks, I think, would be so overjoyed at that proposition, they'd partially fund it. I think that they would bankroll a portion of the idea, or subsidize, to use another term that you're more familiar with. I think they'd absolutely love to fit the bill for some of that stuff. In exchange for being able to sell ads against a spring game versus ads against a real game, that's part one. You give the television partners more inventory. You know what else you give? The fans something to look forward to. Instead of just kind of taking for granted, they can come, they don't come, who cares? This is the entertainment business. I know sometimes people forget that. Even some of our audience pushes back on that, which I quite frankly don't expect, because you guys should be keenly aware. This is an entertainment game. I took some shots from lacrosse fans the other day because I said this isn't lacrosse, but it's not lacrosse. This is not a hating on lacrosse segment or a bash fest against lacrosse. I'm just saying if you look at the crowds at a lacrosse match versus the crowds at a college football game, one of them is bigger than the other for a reason. Americans find football more entertaining than lacrosse. If you're coaching the game, and if you're playing in the game, or if you're administrating around the game, it stands to reason it's in your best interest to provide those people with as entertaining a product as you can. Now, certainly that happens in the fall. Why not give yourself the option to let it happen in the spring as well? I think it gets your players some really, really good work in the spring. Also, if you want to talk about what it does to your roster, it gets you some really good work. And it's not friendly fire in the spring game. There's a third benefit, I think, here, and that is it maintains individual flexibility. So if you watch your rival down the road doing it, and they get all the recruiting benefits, a great recruiting tool, by the way, did I mention? Great recruiting tool. It's a great idea for the fans. It's a great idea for the TV partner. But you know what? If you watch all that and you say, we want nothing to do with it, then guess what? You don't have to have anything to do with it. You may miss out on a little payday. You may miss out on landing some kids. You may miss out on, making everything from gates and concessions and the like to the TV money that comes along with it. But if you don't want to do it, that's fine. You get the individual flexibility. I also need to remind you of something else. Some people are faking it when they say this. Some people are genuine when they say this. Either way, when you say what I'm about to remind you of, and that is FCS teams need to get that paycheck, don't they? This is where you get them the paycheck. I'm not talking about Georgia scheduling Michigan for a spring game. I'm talking about Georgia scheduling Western Michigan for a spring game. I'm talking about Ohio State scheduling Kent State for a spring game. When we're moving into the future and you see schedules change because we have a 12-team playoff and fewer programs are scheduling FCS competition, that's a good thing. I don't need to see Clemson versus Citadel. I don't need to see that. But I'd be happy to see it in the spring. That's where you take care of that. You pay them what you'd pay them, or you partner with a TV network and you pay them $800,000 to come and get some good work in, get good exposure, get a good experience for your roster, so I don't have to watch you favored by 50.5 against them in Week 11. No one wants to see that. That don't work for anyone in the fall. Why don't we do it in the spring? So yes, absolutely, I think that should be a thing. And if you don't want to partake in it, don't partake in it. We'll be fine either way. Next up, speaking of scheduling, we got a scheduling question, I think, next. Really started to fall in love with the new microphone. Because with the new mic, I don't have to lean into it. I can look over here, I can look down, poor posture, I can look up, and the mic picks it up either way. Thank you, Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts won us this microphone in the NFC Championship game, and he doesn't even know it. Zach hit us up with this question. With the addition of OU and Texas, the SEC is likely moving to 3 permanent opponents. What rivalries do you think will be maintained yearly, and which ones will have to be played every other year? Zach is right, and we are quickly about to move to a format in the SEC, or at least it is thought that we're moving to a format that is 3-6-6. And all that means is you're going to play 9 conference games a year. That's the first thing it means. The second thing is 3-6-6 just stands for, the first number is you play those teams every year. Those are 3 permanent rivals. And then the 6-6 means you play half a dozen teams one year, and the half dozen you don't play that year, you'll play them the next year. So in some shape, form, or fashion, you're playing every team in the conference every 24 months. You will have played the entire conference over a rolling 2-year period. But that 3 number is what people are focused on, because that means you're going to play those teams every year. And as you can imagine, this hitting pro ball, not everyone's created equally down here. God bless Vanderbilt. We could throw a rock and hit their campus right now. I think you'd probably rather draw them as an annual opponent than, say, LSU. So who's going to play who? Hoomst is going to play Hoomst here. There have been many theories. I saw Brad Crawford the other day get the work out of the way so we didn't have to compile our own list here. And I'm just going to work off of what he suggested, because I scanned it. It's on 247sports.com. I scanned it, and it was Brad saying, here's where we pretty much think the SEC is going to land on this whole scheduling format. If he's right, it sucks to be Auburn. And if he's right, it is a great day to be Arkansas. And if he's right, I got some thoughts. So with Auburn, it's just brutal. Just brutal. Some things never change. You got death, you got taxes, and you got Auburn being the toughest job in the SEC. So According to Bradford, and I have no reason to doubt that this is the way the SEC will go, Auburn's 3 permanent opponents will be Bama, Georgia, and LSU, which is just that's a splattering. Any given year, that's a splattering. Mind you, they're still drawing other teams. They're still going to randomly play Tennessee, Texas A&M, Texas, Oklahoma, Florida. All those fins are still out just offshore. Those are the 3 you're having to deal with in your boat every year. But at least the good news is Auburn doesn't lose any permanent rival. I don't know that they celebrate that, but that is, I would lay behind Greg Sankey's car in the SEC office parking lot in Birmingham if I were Hugh Freeze before I let this be permanent. That is brutal. As for Texas A&M, this is where we do lose a couple of rivalries. So Brad projected Texas, Oklahoma, and Mississippi State are the 3 permanents for Texas A&M. Now, that means you lose the A&M Arkansas matchup. That means you lose A&M LSU, which had become a feisty little rivalry lately. If I get A&M and Texas back, especially if you play it the day after Thanksgiving, or even on Thanksgiving for all I care, that is good news. We cannot just take and not have to give anything. But those are 2 rivalries you would lose. The Alabama side of the coin, you actually don't lose anything. Brad had Alabama play in Tennessee, Auburn, and LSU. And if I were to pick out their 3 biggest rivalries in the SEC, Bama's biggest 3 rivalries are Auburn and Tennessee and LSU. And so you don't really lose anything. Now, on the flip side, everybody views Bama as a rival. Like Arkansas or Ole Miss or Mississippi State, they view Alabama as a rival. If you live in St. Paul, Minnesota, you don't think of Mississippi State, Alabama as a rivalry. So with Bama, yeah, if you've got Tennessee, Auburn, LSU, that's good. As for Arkansas, there has been I'm not going to call it a conspiracy theory. I'm not going to call it a theory. It's just been a fact. The SEC has backhanded the University of Arkansas at every given opportunity. And if the projections we're looking at on our screen right now are true, this would be a much welcome turning of the page when it comes to relations between Birmingham and Fayetteville. Because if Arkansas's 3 permanent opponents in this new format are Texas, Mississippi State, and Missouri, Arkansas cashed in. That means you don't get A&M every year. That means you don't get Bama every year or LSU every year. That's a good thing. So hold on. Go full Wilson Phillips mode up there. Hold on for 1 more year. Georgia, I can accept what Brad is suggesting here. There's 1 omission. So Florida, Auburn, and South Carolina, those are the 3 that Brad projects. I would love to have Georgia, Tennessee every year. I know I can't have everything I want, but I would love to have Georgia, Tennessee every year. Be that as it may, I do get to keep the Deep South's oldest rivalry there. I do get to keep, obviously, Florida, Georgia. So I'm okay with that. And Tennessee, also, there's a lot of conversation around which 3 teams Tennessee is going to play. Bama is going to be one of them. It won't move forward an inch if you're not playing Bama, Tennessee. So you got Bama, Tennessee, Tennessee, Florida, and Tennessee, Vandy. Again, I need to reiterate, this is not official. This is Brad Crawford's projection that I pretty much agree with. That means we don't have Tennessee, Georgia every year. That means we don't have Tennessee, Kentucky every year. Now, I saw some Tennessee fans, of course I did, arguing, oh, no, we've got to play Kentucky every year. Tennessee, Kentucky, that's what college football revolves around. They wanted to trade out Bama. They wanted to play Kentucky every year instead of Bama. How brave. How brave from my brethren over there in East Tennessee. Credit you guys for stepping up. Give us Big Blue. Keep Crimson. Give us Big Blue. Football, basketball, in this economy, in any economy. I bet you guys did want it. You're not going to get that. You're going to have to play Bama. LSU, there are 2 rivalries, according to Brad, if this were to pass, that they're going to have to give up. LSU playing Auburn, Ole Miss, and Bama every year. That means I don't get LSU, Florida every year. That means I don't get LSU, Texas A&M every year. I'm not crazy about it. Look, here's what's happening. Whether they want to admit it or not, the SEC League office is taking their conference and they're pretty much splitting it. You got the top 8 and the bottom 8. And Everyone knows that exists. You just can't say it out loud. Some programs are perennially better than other programs. But we've never decided a scheduling model where we admitted that up front. Now, it could be that that's irrelevant, or it could be that ESPN walks in the room, because I don't really think their voice has been fully weighted here yet. And ESPN could walk in the room and say, we're giving you $78 trillion, roughly, for the rights to broadcast your games exclusively, at least at the A tier. We want a say in how you format that schedule. Because while people at Missouri or people at South Carolina may be focused on competitive balance, we're not. We want entertainment. We want value. That's the balance we want to strike, value. And so you need to tell your top 8 teams in the conference to suck it up. They're going to play each other a little bit more than they're going to play the bottom 8. Does that sound fair? No, not necessarily. Is anyone going to cry crocodile tears that the University of Georgia has to play a tougher schedule? Probably not. Will we be better off for it? Well, in terms of entertainment, yes. I just think it's a little bit of a slippery slope. If we decide to walk up to the stone in front of us and etch 8 teams' names in one category and 8 in the other category, I know you guys don't think that this league could invert itself, and in some cases, you're right. I don't necessarily think Georgia's going anywhere for a while. I don't know what to make of Florida in the future. I don't know what to make of South Carolina in the future. I have no clue whether Tennessee's here to stay or not. I am just saying you need to leave yourself some wiggle room, would be my advice. I'm sure they haven't thought of that already. Let's move it on. Just a fascinating question here from one Jimothy Dunaway, who you can see tomorrow morning and each and every morning on Next Round Live, which is a program that I appear on semi-frequently, and you can find it on their YouTube channel. Those guys do a great job. Next Round Live. If you want something, if you drive to work and after you listen to our replay, if you're kind of trying to fill the void between 9 a.m. and lunch, check out their channel, Next Round Live. It's a healthy mixture. It's not solely focused on college football. They'll talk a ton of basketball over the next few months. You won't find that here. So if you need that fix, that's where I suggest you go. Anyway, Jim Dunaway, friend of the program, hit us up and said, if you had to fast forward or rewind on college football, would you fast forward through the next 2 years and just get to the expanded playoff, or rewind back to the Ron Franklin, Mike Gottfried, ESPN Saturday night era with no guarantee that history would repeat itself? I spent the majority of my afternoon thinking about this. Famously, I don't listen to music at the gym, so this is what dominated my mind. Colin's listening to Linkin Park at the gym, as Colin does. I'm sitting here thinking about Jim Dunaway giving me the fast-forward rewind button, like in the movie Click with Adam Sandler. Sneaky emotional scene in that movie, by the way. No spoiler alerts. I don't think there's an easy answer for this. I think some of you stereotype me, and you just assume I'm rewind at all costs. Well, that's not always true. That's not true in college football. It's not true in life. There are things that I enjoyed about the past that I would love, that I would much prefer to the present. Music, film. But I don't necessarily want to go backwards when it comes to nutrition and medicine. There are a lot of really good things we got today. There are a lot of things that I just assume hit the rewind button on. So in college football, it's the same way. But what I'm ultra curious on, I'll get to the postseason thing at the end, because I think you know where I'm going on that. But what I'm interested on is some of the in-between and where you guys land on this. Because truthfully, I think we could do like a 3-hour telethon, and we could just take calls and raise money for a great cause, the Jesse Foundation, for example. We could just take calls on this, and we would probably get so many bits of feedback that I didn't think about. But what I thought about is the style of game. I don't know what I want to hit. Do I want to hit fast forward or rewind? I think some parts of our game today are very exciting. I also told you earlier in the show, I enjoy a good 17-13 defensive slugfest. I don't know what I want to go back to or go forward to. I think it's very much a case-by-case thing. When it comes to technology and what it's done for sports and what it's done for college football, we have never presented broadcast television like we're presenting it now when it comes to college football. The live presentation is unbelievable. It is mind-boggling when you go back and watch tapes of games from the early 2000s, and it looks like it's 1945. It's in what high-definition television has done is mind-blowing. I don't have time to explain frame rates to you, as Bradley well knows, but it's mind-blowing. So that's a great thing. It's a great thing. Presentation, broadcast, what technology has allowed us to do in terms of replay. Do I really want to go back and watch teams get 5 downs en route to winning a championship? No, I don't want to watch that. Having said that, if I go back in time, I can get Keith Jackson back. I can get Ron Franklin back. I can get Mike Godfrey back. I don't know. I was talking to producer Jesse earlier about this. I don't know that even if you do your best, if you're Brad Nessler or Gus Johnson or Chris Fowler, I'm a huge Sean McDonough guy. Joe Tessitore, massive fan. I don't think those guys have any prayer of ever living up to the legend of Keith Jackson, only because once Keith Jackson's career was over, it started to become romanticized. Truthfully, Keith Jackson was being romanticized long before his career was over. But, I mean, a lot of the newer generation, your biggest impression of Keith Jackson was the '05 Rose Bowl. Texas and USC, that's his last game. And that was the tail end of a decades-long career. That guy called World Series, he called national championships, called everything under the sun. And he's the soundtrack for your parents' and your grandparents' generation of college football, and anything that you watch in archival form that features a big game from the history of the sport, it probably has him as the narration, as the backdrop, as the play-by-play. My point is, he's been romanticized, rightfully so, to the point where no one would allow Keith Jackson to be bypassed. What I was trying to say there is kind of a side point. My point is, Keith Jackson really was that good. It's not that thing that people do with Babe Ruth where they say, no modern hitter could compare to Babe Ruth. Yeah, they could. Yeah, they could. Now, Babe Ruth didn't have the access to advanced strength and conditioning and technology and nutrition that the modern player has, which is why comparing eras is pointless. But yeah, they absolutely could measure up to Babe Ruth. Today's play-by-play guy, can they measure up to Keith Jackson? I don't think you'll be given a chance to, because just like Babe Ruth got 5% better every year after he retired and then passed on, Keith Jackson gets 5% better every year. The greatest have a tendency to do that. Have you ever noticed that? The greatest, Sandy Koufax throws 127 miles an hour today. Keith Jackson gets better and better and better, and the guy hadn't called a game since '05, and it's magical to watch. But if I went back in time, if I get to rewind, I get some of those classic broadcast pairings, and I wouldn't be against that. But there is one thing that has rubbed me the wrong way for a long time. And I know Google says I'm 53 years old because it's confusing me with the Outer Banks guy. Season 3 dropping next month, by the way. I am not 53 years old, but I'm about to sound 53 years old for a second. Cell phones have had a detrimental impact on live sporting experiences. And what I mean by that, and this is where I would not hit, this is where I love to hit rewind. I just told you technology has done good things for sports, and they have, but the price we've paid is, for some reason, at sporting events, people don't lose themselves in the moment anymore. At least a lot of people don't. They feel the need to capture the moment, which is ironic because in looking at their screen, they miss the actual moment. So the only memory they have is of looking at their phone's screen as the phone captured the moment. When LeBron broke the scoring record the other day, it was one of the most iconic shots that I've ever seen, photographic shots, because you had an entire arena full of people who have spent their parents' life savings to be courtside at that game, and they're all going like that as LeBron hits the shot. And Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, is sitting on the front row with his arms crossed, just watching. He's the only person who gets what I'm saying. When you're at sporting events, they're not as loud as they were a generation ago. Because a lot of times when people are going like this and they're recording something, they don't want to make noise because it ruins the shot. And I've got some news for you. 100% of the time, the game that you're attending will be on broadcast television, a replay will be available, And those cameras, pretty much 24 of them, or 16 if it's a B-level broadcast, are going to have captured a better shot than you captured in Section 228. I would love for people to put the phone down and get lost in the moment again, because the in-stadium atmosphere suffers because of it. I'm not saying it's not still loud. I'm just saying if I could rewind before people really cared about capturing it themselves, the flashbulb era, give me that era. I miss the flashbulb era. You can pinpoint this, by the way, and it's not just college football. You go back to the mid-2000s, and you can pinpoint some of the last great events that happened before the cell phone reinvented how people attended sporting events. And it's a little nostalgic. I always go back to WrestleMania 18, personally. But you can look at the '05 Rose Bowl. Basically, it's the flashbulb ratio. The fewer flashbulbs you see in big moments, that means the more cell phones are out. And it had to happen, I know. But I guess my answer is, Jim, I don't know. I think there's about a 60% part of me that wants to rewind. But there is a solid 40% part of me who understands there's a lot of good that's come. Now, as it comes to the format of the sport, of course I don't want to go to the expanded playoff. I'm not relitigating that. I've made you a promise several weeks in a row now. I'm not going to debate the playoff expansion thing anymore. But of course I want to go back in time. Of course I'd love to go back to where people fought themselves and fought pollsters over who gets rewarded the national championship. But as I've explained to you, it's not because I think that was a foolproof way of deciding a national champion. It's because in college football, I just don't care about the end of the season as much. I care about Saturdays in the fall, the experience, and bowl season. And if I get a national championship game, that's great. I don't feel that way about any other sport, just college football. So when you argue with me, well, the NFL and NBA and Major League, yes, and I watch those sports, and I love watching the Super Bowl, love watching the World Series. Don't think it has any relevance when it comes to comparing it to college football. So that's me, and you can be you, and we'll be fine. Next question. Is this Brad Powers' question? Is it? Yes, it's time. I have some video coming up for you. If you'll do me the honor of liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Okay. Brad Powers, big friend of the program, hit us up from Millbury, Ohio. He said, "How long do you think the ping pong streak lasts?" It's a good question, Brad. What streak is he talking about? A lot of you follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and you know that there has been, I think, one of the more impressive story arcs in any form of entertainment in the year of our Lord 2022 and 23. And it's been happening right here in our office. Little bit of backstory. I celebrated the day that we got a ping pong table at 24/7 Sports. And I think it's been very good for office morale, for team camaraderie. We've seen some people come out of their shell. We've seen other people get put in a shell. We've seen a couple of folks get put in a body bag lately. One of them is a form of management around here. So here's what happened. What happened is I let my guard down. I'm 194-4 in this office. 2 of those losses came to producer Jesse. They have asterisks next to them because I was foolish enough to play Jesse right after I worked out legs. It's an excuse, but it's valid. The other 2 came against HR and management. But the one against management hurt more so than the other 3 losses for obvious reasons. If you understand the Austin McMahon dynamic from the late 90s, you understand how late kick interacts with management around this office. And there is no better test of our mettle than when we face our superiors in an athletic competition. And you guys don't get to do that. You don't get to arm wrestle your boss. You don't get to play your boss in athletic competition. But we work at a sports company, and so people question your manhood if you won't step up, and that includes management. And so I've faced management a few times, and I had won. I had an impressive little streak going. But then January 30th, 2023 happened. And if you're listening on podcast, I will explain it to you. But if you're watching on YouTube, Director Colin regrettably has the video. It's cathartic for me to watch this. So that's me. That's management. It's game point. Bradley's lurking in the background, and there it is. I have gone down for the first time in my career to management. And the people I thought were my friends are clapping. The people I thought were the people I thought were on my side in the fight against that entity, management, are gleeful at watching me suffer. I'm laying on the ground right now. It was at this moment that all-out war was declared in this office, and I have gone 73-0 since then. But it gets better. Brad Powers, you don't even know this yet, because I haven't told the world on this program, but I'll tell you right now, management hit me up the other day. And management said, "What you doing on Friday?" Because normally, Friday's a pretty light day around here. I'm either traveling in the fall or I'm off the grid in the winter and spring. And I said, "Well, management, I'm doing whatever you need me to do." I'm not really that subjective. I just knew what he wanted. He wanted to come in here. He felt himself a little bit. Got himself his own paddle in there. We got a new set of balls, and he wanted to come in here, and he wanted to have the office to ourselves and engage in a good old-fashioned best of whatever. 11 games later, I was 11-0, and management had tucked tail and headed back down south of Nashville, where management resides, in those kinds of neighborhoods. He had punched his gate code in, and he had gone and hidden behind those walls and fortresses they tend to live in. I went back up to the slums I stay in. And so I went back, and I was very proud of myself. Brad Powers, I'm telling you this, I will not lose to management again. It's not going to happen. I got the wake-up call I needed. So you can lay whatever odds you need to. The days of management honoring himself around this office when it comes to ping pong are over. I say that to you as sure as Maximus told it to Commodus in the movie Gladiator, which has been one of the premier sources of motivation for me lately. Colin, I don't think we need to clip that for YouTube. Next up, let's go back to August, or May, as it turns out. We got some bold predictions to revisit, and a mixed bag of predictions here. Very interesting when I looked at these 5 tonight. I asked you to give me these. What would you bet your money on if we asked you to bet your money? And you came, and a lot of you crashed and burned, but you went hard in the paint, and I'll give you that. The first one is about Dylan Gabriel, Oklahoma quarterback. Travis said Dylan Gabriel will be a Heisman finalist. Well, he was hurt, so we always rule it out if injury is involved. But even if injury wasn't involved, I don't quite think that was the trajectory that Dylan Gabriel was on. Had good stats, but it takes a different level of production to be Heisman worthy. I went back and looked, though, in the preseason, and this was not the boldest of predictions. In fact, I put an 8 on it, only because he said he's not going to win it. He said he's going to be a finalist. Dylan Gabriel was only number 7 in the preseason odds to win the Heisman, so this was not a far-fetched, extra bold prediction. It had enough boldness for me to put an 8 on it, but Dylan Gabriel falls well short. Management is texting me. I mean, the audacity. It's At least they watch. Next up, Kansas beats Texas again. It's the again that really gets me, because Travis gave us 2 predictions. So his second prediction was Kansas beats Texas, comma, again. Can you feel the love out of other Big 12 fan bases for Texas? I sure can. Kansas was on a roll earlier in the year. Their over-under win total was 2.5. They started 5-0. Things went downhill pretty quickly after that. Now, Texas stumbled a little bit out of the gate. Quinn Ewers got hurt. They almost beat Bama, but they didn't. They lost to Texas Tech. But Texas rebounded. And by the time they played Kansas, it was a tale of 2 seasons for both programs, and it showed. Kansas was in the process of losing 7 of their last 8, and that included a game against Texas, 55-14. Texas ran the ball for 427 yards. Metric system, that equates to roughly half a mile. So, yeah, that didn't happen. I put a 9 on the boldness scale. I had faith in Texas. The model, we all know, famously had faith in Texas. The model would favor Texas by 3.5 against the Chiefs if they played next week. But, yeah, the model, at least for one afternoon, was right when it comes to Texas. Next up, let's head over to Knoxville. Prediction. Tennessee upsets LSU and goes undefeated heading into Tuscaloosa. Well, they played the game in Knoxville, but the prediction still stands. Tennessee's going to be undefeated when they play Alabama. Now, I think there's some revisionist history that happens with the way Tennessee's season played out. See, a lot of folks look back at Tennessee's season and they say, this isn't bold. Of course they were going to be undefeated. Who did they play? Pitt? Not a big deal. Florida? Terrible. Well, that's not how you felt in the preseason. In the preseason, that Pitt game was like a field goal point spread. And it was an overtime game, by the way. So that was close. The Florida game was not as close as the final score indicated, but Florida was ranked at the time they played them. So that was a 10-point spread, but I was there. The Every Given Saturday tour was there. That's how big that game was perceived to be. And so they beat Florida 38-33. Then they go to LSU, a game we were supposed to be at before, and it does me no joy to utter this sentence, even though it sounds a little bougie. Before we had private plane issues, and we didn't get down there. It's a good thing we didn't get down there. It would have been a waste of a morning. LSU got boat raced by Tennessee. So we had all that happen. And Tennessee does indeed face Alabama undefeated, and even after they faced Alabama, they were still undefeated, friends. I put a 6.5 on this. I didn't think it was that bold. I did think Tennessee was going to be undefeated when they faced Alabama. So, score 1 for all of us here. Next up, we go all the way to the West Coast. Oregon's going to win the Pac-12, huh? Jeff said Oregon, under first-year coach Dan Lanning, wins the Pac-12 over Lincoln Riley and SC. I put a 5 on this. It wasn't that bold. If you looked at the preseason odds, it was Southern Cal, it was Utah, it was Oregon. I think a little ways down the list, UCLA, but Oregon, even during the season, felt like they were trending this way. We went out there for the UCLA game, and they beat UCLA pretty handily. Candidly, I thought they were on the way to winning the Pac-12. And then Bo Nix got hurt, and I didn't think he was going to play against Utah. He did. They ended up beating Utah. So, ironically, Oregon beats the Pac-12 champ. But the problem is they lost to Washington. They lost to Oregon State by a combined 7 points, by the way. But they count as losses. And so it ends up being Utah against USC. And it's Utah again that beats USC. So Oregon does not come through, but don't worry. They'll be in the picture every year for the foreseeable future. Now, the last one we had a lot of internal debate about today. You tell me if you think this was bold. Nebraska wins the Big Ten West. I'm going to ignore the last part. If you're watching on YouTube, you see what it says. I'll tell you on podcast. It says don't sleep on Scott Frost. Scott Frost got put to sleep. So let's forget about that last part. But the first part, Nebraska wins the Big Ten West. I only put a 4 on that. I did not think it was bold at all. And my reason, even though Nebraska was a tire fire this year, I don't think I was wrong. There was no bold prediction to be made about who was going to win the Big Ten West because the odds were all over the place. Nebraska was actually, Wisconsin was, so think about this. Wisconsin was favored to win the Big Ten West. Their coach was fired 3/4 of the way through the season. So the favorite is nowhere to be found. Nebraska was second in the odds-on market to win the West. And then you had Iowa. You didn't have a solid favorite, is my point. Wisconsin was plus 1,000 to win the Big Ten. Nebraska plus 1,800. Iowa plus 2,500. Purdue plus 2,800. Minnesota plus 3,000. That's the way it looked. So I put a 4 on it. And I equated it to you walking up to me and having a little fish bowl, and there are 10 pieces of wadded up paper in there. And I draw one out, and someone predicts, hey, I think you drew out the number 6. Is it a bold prediction? No. Every prediction you could make about the number I drew out of the fishbowl is equally as bold. Just like if I said Wisconsin's going to win it, Iowa's going to win it, Nebraska's, it's all the same. They were all the same. It was just a pool of average apathy in the Big Ten West. And Purdue ended up winning the thing. And it wasn't decided until the last week. It was not Nebraska, though. But I stand by that 4. I stand by it wholeheartedly. Appreciate you guys watching. We have an appearance coming up this week. Now, you know I don't do many of these. But our acquaintance, Brandon Walker, hit us up over at Barstool Sports, which was sold to Penn Entertainment for like, I don't know, half the money in the U.S. the other day. And it said, we want you on the show. So I've cleared some time. I think it airs Wednesday, and we'll be on the show. I don't know what's going to happen. We are intentionally not speaking to each other before the appearance, and it'll be what it'll be. But I can tell you this, in college football fashion, this will be a home and home. So while I go there now, he will be coming here. The difference, friends, is I'm going to go there electronically. He's coming here in person. I'll make sure of it. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you're following on all the social channels because there's going to be really, really good college football and non-college football related content coming up soon. So at Late Kick Josh is where you can find me on Instagram and Twitter. Until Thursday Night Live and Tuesday for the Late Kick Extra podcast, have yourselves a great start to your week. For producer Jesse, for director Colin, I'm Josh Pate. Take care. Have a great week and God bless.